And we are live. Welcome, mystery and thriller fans. I'm your on air host, Sara DiVello, and I am so excited to welcome today, live from Australia, Amy Suter Clarke, here to give us the inside scoop on her brand new book out now, Lay Your Body Down. Amy, welcome to Mystery and Thriller Mavens. Tell us about this book.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm so glad to be here, and thanks for working with the time zone shifts. It's always a good time working that out. So I'm excited about Lay Your Body Down. It came out 2 weeks ago tomorrow, and it is about an ex fundamentalist Christian who returns to her small hometown in Minnesota for the funeral of her first love. And when she's there, everyone is saying that he was killed in a hunting accident, and she finds that extremely suspicious. So she decides she's going to stay around town for a little while, poke around, and see if she can't figure out what really happened to him.
Dun dun dun. Now, Amy, you're from a small Midwest town.
I am.
You just returned to Australia. Were you? We're going to need to know if you were if you were over here visiting the funeral of your first love. We got a lot to talk about. Is this memoir or mystery? We're going to find out. First, I just want to welcome everyone. We are live on 7 different destinations across Facebook and YouTube. So, hey, mystery and thriller loving friends, no matter where you're watching from, you're in the right place. This is the right time. It is Mystery Monday because Mondays can be murder. We're going to make them a little less painful for you. If you've been here before, you know the drill. And if you're new, welcome. We're so happy. Here's the drill. Every Monday, I give you my handpicked featured authors, and you get to ask them anything. So ask Amy about this book idea, where she got this crazy idea. Tell us about these characters, her writing process. Is she a plotter? Is she a pantser? What's she working on next? We got a lot of questions. We got a lot of ground to cover, and that New York Times book review. Ooh la la! Let's get into it. Type it in the comments. I'll get them right over to her. Hey, Kristen. She says, "Hi, Sarah and Amy, joining from Long Island. Yay! I love Long
Hi,
Island. Hi,
Kristen.
Kristen." Robin, welcome to the conversation. Joining us from YouTube. She says, "Hello." Let's get Robin. Kristen says, "I loved this book so much. I devoured it." Okay,
Oh, that's
Kristen,
the best.
we're going to need to know what you loved about it. What made you devour it? What kept those pages flying? Spill the tea, girl. Tell us all the things while Amy starts to tell us where this idea came from.
Yeah, so I had this idea a few years ago, and I write books set in Minnesota. My debut, Girl 11, is set in Minnesota, but it's set in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul. So it's much more of a city based novel. And I grew up in a small town, so I thought it would be interesting to write a book that was set in a small community like mine. It is not based on my life, but it does draw a lot of experiences from my childhood growing up in an insular community in a very conservative patriarchal church. And I wanted to write about that in a way that felt fresh to me. I hadn't read about that kind of thing in a thriller before. I've read a lot of cult type books, but usually they're more culty, like the traditional view of a cult with the one charismatic leader who develops his own religion. And in this case, it's just this is what evangelical Christianity looks like in a lot of churches across America and all over the world. And it's not really a cult, it's a whole religion, but it is often based around one person, usually the lead pastor, and their, whole charismatic preaching style and the way that they build up power around themselves. So I wanted to write about that from a place of someone who had a little bit of experience in that area.
Interesting. Yeah, so that was one of the reasons I was so excited to talk with you today, Amy. So tell us, because I am seeing a lot of that now. I know you're over in Australia where everybody's so much more laid back, and I love that having lived there myself. I can't wait to go back. But over here, things are pretty tense. So first of all, how one thing I've noticed is that when people grow up with that mindset, it's really hard to realize that that is a mindset and not everyone else thinks like that. So what was the moment where you were like, wait, this is not the truth. This is pretty messed up. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I grew up in this town until I was 18, and then I went off to college. And even though I went to college in a private Christian college that was also quite conservative. I still met a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds and life experiences, and that was like probably the first trigger in my wake up call. But also then I moved to London in 2011 to do my master's degree, and that was, at a secular university, and all kinds of people that I had never met before, people with different religious backgrounds or no religious background. And that was just hugely eye opening, not just for my religious perspective and my faith, but also just for my politics and, things that I had grown up taking for granted as a kid a white kid in a Midwest town was very obviously not the actual gospel truth when I moved overseas and actually got to meet other people with different experiences.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think when it's like I always say I wish it was a requirement that everyone lived abroad, because living outside of your own country, both when I lived in London as well and when I lived in Australia, is such a uniquely informative experience, because it actually helps you to realize your identity as an American and how Americans are perceived and viewed outside of America. And it is a mind bending, eye opening, heart opening, giant shift that I think, frankly, everyone would benefit from. And so many people in Australia and in Europe do live in other countries. Like, you can go to the most random, you could scale Mount Everest with just a Lima and yourself. And at the top of Mount Everest will be standing one Australian and one German person. Like, and they'll be like, hey, mate,
Yeah, and a
who you
South African often.
it's so true. And living outside of your own country is so helpful. And it sounds like that was sort of what, was that helped you to get that shift as well. So and that shift is what informed this book.
Yes, absolutely. It's not something that's available to everyone, but I wish that it was because it's such a valuable experience. And not only for what you were saying about like hearing how other people view Americans, but I think just seeing the way other people live, even if nobody's like sort of preaching at you about like we're so much better than you here in England or whatever, which is not really something I ever heard, but just seeing how their society functions and going, a classic example would be healthcare, right? Because healthcare is just such a big debate still in America. And like every other Western country that I'm aware of has some form of universal healthcare. And when I was over in the States, actually, for this book launch, I developed a terrible ear infection and had to go to the doctor multiple times. And boy, does that add up really quickly when you don't have local health insurance, and even when you do. Um, so it's a good reminder, and it's hard not to completely take for granted now that I've lived in countries that had socialized medicine for the last 12 years, like how much of a big difference that makes.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I've gotten sick in many other countries and had incredible healthcare for free, even though I was
Mhm.
not a citizen, didn't pay taxes there, and probably, had no right, over here, if it was the reverse, that, we'd be like, oh, that person has no right to healthcare. But over there, they're like, of course, we're going to take care of you, and there'll be no charge, and, go on your
Yeah.
way. It's much more civilized. There's a lot of things to love about living life outside of the US.
Mhm.
Robin is saying from Minnesota to Australia. Yeah.
The
Mm.
natural progression of life. No, I met an Australian man when I lived in London for my master's degree, and we got married and moved here. And it was originally going to be just for a few years, but we really love it here. I mean, obviously, this is his home, but I fell in love with the country and, the lifestyle here and all that. And I just can't imagine leaving now, even though it's really hard to be away from my family, of course.
I know. Australia. First of all, their accents are adorable. It's like you
They
just
really
could
are.
listen. I mean, I could listen to an Australian accent all day long. When I first, when I first really thought you were in, when I first heard you were in Melbourne, I was like, "Ooh, I'm gonna get to listen to that." But then I was like, "Oh crap, she's from
No,
Minnesota."
sorry.
Just do this. Fake the accent, Amy. We're gonna need you to do that.
Well, I
Diane.
try to do it when I'm reading to my kids because I want them to have Australian accents, and
Oh,
obviously
good.
they're around me the most right now, so I've gotta give myself a little twang, start dropping my R's.
Start dropping your R's. Exactly. Just start
Yeah.
calling the girls Sheila. start calling everyone mate. It's always
I have
something.
to say I've never heard an Australian use Sheila unironically.
Oh my
Hi,
gosh, I
Diane.
have. I hear it all the time. Diane joining us from YouTube saying, "Good evening, Sarah. Good evening, Amy." Hi, Diane. So good to have you. She says, "Good evening, everyone." Kristen says, "The cult and religious themes kept me engaged. I just find both so interesting. I grew up in the Roman Catholic Church, so I love reading about other religions, and the idea of a megachurch is just so foreign for me." So, for those of us who are not familiar with megachurches, Amy, tell us what the heck they are.
Ooh, that's something that I've not thought to sit down and define. I guess I consider a megachurch a place that devotes a significant portion of its resources to bringing people in and having kind of production value. So if you think of like Hillsong is like an obvious choice for a mega church, and a lot of people would know about Hillsong because they're of their music, even if they haven't actually ever seen a church service there. But I mean, there might be an actual definition in terms of numbers of people, but like the church in Lay Your Body Down is it probably wouldn't be defined a mega church by its numbers, but by the fact that it's taken over the whole town and almost all the churches have been subsumed into it. And I think I put the town at about 5,000 people and over 2,000 people go to the church. So, more than or like half the town basically goes to that church. So it's just that feel I feel like it's a feeling you get when you walk in and it's like a stadium, it doesn't look like the standard what you think of a church with the pews and the big cross at the front and the, velvet floor and all of that stuff. It's much more, yeah, like a stadium or like a concert than a traditional church service. And the pastor's always wearing jeans.
That's how it was for
That's
you
a
growing
dead
up.
giveaway. No.
Is this how it was for you?
Oh, yeah, jeans and a button-down shirt or, like slacks and a button-down shirt, never a suit.
Why is that? To be more like
More
cool.
casual, more relatable. You want it again, it's all about bringing people in, right? So you want people to feel comfortable and be like, "Oh, something's different here. They're cool here. They're not so like stuffy and old school." And I say all that, kind of tongue in cheek, but like there's good things and bad things about that. Like obviously you want to meet people where they are and not have people feel repelled by coming in and being like, "Oh, I don't want to be around these people." Um, so like so many things about the church, there's often a very good reason for things and a non nefarious reason for things, but it's just who has a say in that and what their motives and intentions are that can be corrupted.
So interesting. Sophie Ann, welcome to the conversation, joining us from YouTube. She said, "We really love USA and Americans. Bless you." Thank you, Sophie Ann. That's very kind of you. Diane has some craft questions, and I am hashtag here for it. Diane always has really great craft questions. So let's dive into it. Amy, do you have any writing rituals? If so, what are they?
I used to have more rituals, I think, where I would, sit down and I would have music and I had like sea salt candle that I really liked that I would light when I was working. And 2 years ago, I had twins, and now I just write whenever I get the chance. And so, unfortunately, I can't put a lot of, ritual or build up behind it. It's just, I've got an hour, they're sleeping, and I'm going to sit down and pound out 1,000 words if I can, or that kind of thing. Often I'll try to read whatever scene I wrote just before as like a way of kind of getting back into it. But yeah, unfortunately, I'm not a very ritual based writer anymore. I'm more of a writing in snatched time kind of writer.
It's so interesting because I read that Jodi Picoult, who I just saw speak in conversation with her writing partner Jenny Finney Boylan, they co-wrote Mad Honey, which was, oh my god, so fabulous to hear them. But it was so interesting because Jodi, I think, has 5 children, and she was saying that she had to write in those pockets, snatched, found pockets of time with her
Yeah.
5 children, sometimes in tiny little 15-minute increments. And for me, who A, struggles with anxiety, and B, is happily child free. I can't imagine dropping mentally in that fast. My brain just can't do it. So, do you think you always were able to do that, or you literally
No.
had to rewire your brain?
Yeah, it's really just a needs must kind of a situation, I think. And you know, I now have my kids in childcare 3 days a week, so I work this is one of those days, which is why I can do this without children screaming in the background. Um, so I do more solid hours of work on those days. But when I'm really into a project, I do try to work on it almost every day. Not as a rule, but just to kind of keep the thread and the juice going. And yeah, it's definitely taken practice. I had to finish Lay Your Body Down in the 4 months after the boys came along. So I have twins, and that was insane. That I even trying to write in the first few months of a baby's life is just wild. But somehow I managed to do it. And a big part of that is I have a very supportive husband. And so, if I could just get away, if I could go close myself in the office for an hour or two a day, I work pretty quickly, especially when I'm editing, because I usually am just very immersed in the story by that point. So I know what needs to get done and I can just kind of get on with it. Um, yeah, so I think going back to your question about rewiring your brain, I think that's just something that I've had to do in order to keep on working, because otherwise I would just be on hiatus, which, you know, it's not a good time in my career to try to be on hiatus when I'm just kind of starting out. So,
Mm, mm. Let's go a little more into your process. So, Diane, thank you for this question as well. How do you plot? So, first of all, do you plot? And
oh,
how
yes.
do you plot?
Yeah, I used to be a person who wrote a pantser, as they call them, and just kind of sit down and wrote whatever came to me. And that was really fun. And then I didn't publish any of those books. Um, but I came across the book. First of all, I think I read the book Story by Robert McKee, which is actually a screenwriting book, but it's really useful for plotting out novels as well. And I think kind of following on from that, a similar style of book is Save the Cat Writes a Novel. And so that's the book I use whenever I'm outlining a new book. So I at least have the beats of the story that I go to. So I've got that done for my third book that I'm working on now. And for this book, I also, unfortunately, my process for the last two books has been to write the entire book the wrong way and then have to completely rewrite it. And that's a nightmare and not something that I want to try to do again, especially with being time poor now. So I picked up this newer book called Story Genius, and it's exceptional. I really recommend it. Even if it's not something that you use the entire method of the book, it's really interesting. It's all about the brain science of what connects us to a story and how to kind of latch on to that. And there's a lot of character work that gets done before you even start writing the actual novel. You write a few scenes of your character's backstory and what their fundamental misbelief about the world is, and how that took hold and was confirmed throughout their life up until the point of the start of the novel. And
And what was the
it
name? That was Story
it's called
Genius?
Story Genius.
Okay,
Yeah.
Story Genius, Save the Cat. And was there a third one?
And it's just called Story by Robert McKee. Yeah. Um, so Th that's a really interesting question. I think, Save the Cat does what does your character want and what do they need? Story Genius talks about what is their fundamental misbelief and what do they need to do to overcome that in the story, basically. So every scene needs to be connected to their misbelief about the world and show how they're progressing throughout the book towards relieving that misbelief. It's really interesting and it's worked really well, I think, to get me into this character's mindset because of all three books that I've written, this is an extremely character driven book. And so I really needed to understand her through and through. And it's a lot more interesting to me than like, what's her favorite
Mm,
color?
mm.
Yeah. So those are the books that
Diane, thank you for the
I
great
use to
craft
plot.
question.
Yes.
Yay, Dan. Perfect. Diane, thank you so much for the great craft question. And Amy, thank you for that great answer. So great to know what books you find, have found useful in your practice. And Diane is also adding that sorry, I'm scrolling through. She says, that she also grew up at the Roman Catholic Church too. And Amy, you have her intrigued. Mega churches are a thing. And she says she remembers the Murder She Wrote episode with the mega church. It's so
I am
interesting because
super intrigued by that because I watched a lot of those episodes with my mom. That was like one of her shows. And I
yeah,
do not remember that at all. And now I want to go look it up. That sounds really interesting.
I used to watch that with my grandmother and I loved that. And I don't remember that one either. So thank you so much, Diane, for that one. Oh, she's explaining to us Murder in the Electric Cathedral was the Murder She
Thank
Wrote
you.
episode. Oh, thank you,
I'm going to
Diane.
be
Thank
looking that up.
Indeed. I want to see Jessica Fletcher take that on. And I just want to, hasten to add that, of course, not all mega churches are like this. I have a really dear friend who
Yep.
is the daughter of the largest mega church, head of the mega church she is the daughter of the head of the largest mega church in Florida. And she is such a beautiful human. And her dad is such an incredible human being. And they truly, truly are living a life of service, serving the most poor, underserved people who need the most help in such a beautiful
Hmm.
way.
Well, and
And
that's what the
I
church is
see her all
supposed
the
to
time.
be, according to
Yeah,
the Bible.
exactly.
And
And
that's
they
one of
really
the
are.
things I really
Yeah.
wanted to do with this book was to not just bash Christianity. I
Mm,
wanted to have a balance and show like there are very good things about this faith and about the people who are drawn to it. And not to be a person who quotes myself, but I wrote in in Girl 11 that the Bible's like a hammer. It can be used as a tool or a weapon depending on who's using it.
that
And
is such a good quote.
yeah, that's one of the things I love to hear is, about megachurches. Like, did you say that's in Florida?
Hmm.
That, their resources go towards helping people, and that's, in the Bible, in Acts, like the church pooled their resources and gave away to the things they didn't need to the people who needed them, and that's what it was supposed to be like. That's the foundation.
Exactly. Kristen wants to know. Let's talk a little bit more about your writing process. So you used to be a pantser. You said you sat down
Hmm.
and wrote whatever came to you. None of that was published. Now you are 100% planner, or are you somewhere in between?
So I have an outline that's not a scene by scene by scene, but definitely a pretty broad view of what the book is going to be in terms of all of those beats. So, like the key emotional moments throughout the book. Um, but I do leave myself open to changing things. And definitely did happen with Lay Your Body Down, where, something just kind of occurs to me when I sit down to write. It's not even something that I usually plan. It's just like I'm typing and it's just like, oh, this character is suddenly doing this thing. Now I've got to make that work. And it almost always stays like those kind of moments of inspiration are usually good. It's not usually a tangent for me, which is lucky because I know a lot of writers who go off on tangents and then they end up deleting 20,000 words and having to go back. And thankfully, that doesn't happen to me too much anymore. But with Lay Your Body Down, one thing I did do when I had to do my rewrite, which was literally a down to the bones rewrite, like not even a revision. I had to completely redo the plot, and the only thing that stayed were the characters. Um, and when I did that outline to send to my editor for the new way the story would look, I wrote all the way up to the climax. So the moment where the main character is in a really bad situation and there's no way out. And I told my editor, I don't know how she's going to get out of it, but I'll figure it out when I get there. Because I think what had happened to me previously is that if I knew the climax, I knew the ending, I got bored and then it wasn't very exciting to keep on going. But having that little bit of a mystery in my head kind of gave me the motivation to get there and see what would happen. Plus, by the time I got there, I know the characters so much better, having spent so much time writing them, that sometimes things kind of came out that made more sense uh, to that point. So, and then also it gave it I was worried if I knew what would happen and I knew how she'd get out of it, I would make it too easy. So not knowing how she would get out of it made it feel like it was a more complex situation. Oh, I'm not hearing you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I
Great.
can.
It was literally like tie me up, put me in the basement, and I will find my way out. Like you
Yeah,
have to actually act this out.
exactly. Yeah. Oh, I've definitely had times where I'm like, "Hey, Peter, Peter's my husband. Can you like hold my wrist like this?" And, like just trying to work out the dynamics of, the choreography of a fight scene or something like that.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I feel like you should be filming that and putting that, sharing this behind the scenes tidbits on Instagram.
Yeah.
Ooh, good question. What are you reading now?
That's such a good question. My reading time has really taken a dive because of having kids and trying to write while having kids. I am reading a book called The Making of Biblical Womanhood,
Ooh.
which is really excellent. I think I actually have it sitting here. Nope, I do not. But that's a really great book. It's by an author who basically is going into her background of being a pastor's wife
Mm,
and how the modern concept of biblical womanhood has been intentionally shaped by patriarchal men rather than the actual Bible itself. I'm
mm,
not very far into it, but it's very good so far, and it's a very good sister text, I guess, to Lay Your Body Down. It's nonfiction,
mm.
obviously, but
Great.
it's, if you read Lay Your Body Down and you're like, what is this world? Or if you
Yeah.
watch Shiny Happy People, for example, because that just came out,
Uh-huh.
this is a really interesting text to read. It's all about the control of women in the church.
Oh, how fascinating.
Um, yeah, and then I'm
Kristen wants to know.
also listen. Oh,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry.
No, no, no. Go
I'm
ahead.
also listening to an audiobook called White Women by
Oh,
Regina Jackson and Sarah Rowe.
yeah.
And that is research for my next book, but also just, important personal development and growth. I think like
Yeah.
I definitely feel a need to constantly be aware of my own shortcomings and the areas that I still have to learn. And it's a very challenging but very good book.
Yeah. And to do some unlearning as well, because I know I'm in the process
Absolutely.
of unlearning and relearning and doing that work as a white woman as well. It's so important in our responsibility for sure.
Yeah.
Kristen wants to know what types of research did you have to do this book? So was it all just informed from your memories, having had that experience of growing up in the megachurch in Minnesota? Were you reading more books like The Making of the Biblical Wife? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I didn't do a lot of research for this book compared to Girl 11. Girl 11 was very research intensive, but it's more of a procedural thriller type of book compared to this. Most of this was definitely based on my own memories and experiences, and obviously, having grown up in a town like this, I didn't have to do any research about that. But I did listen to a podcast called The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill, which is about a mega church in Seattle that fell apart because the mega church pastor was a complete narcissist and um, a little bit of a monster. And so that was really interesting. It gave me a lot of fodder for the character of Pastor Rick, which is the pastor in my book. And let's see, I think that was the main thing. Like, it really wasn't a lot of, as I said, a lot of research. It was just, kind of delving into my own personal trauma and memories, I guess.
And has anyone approached you from your childhood and said, Amy, oh my God, thank you for saying it, or the opposite of how dare you?
Yeah, I've definitely gotten only nice messages so far. I am waiting for the not so nice ones, not only from people I grew up with, but just from Christians who don't like having the bad parts of their religion exposed. As someone whose podcast I listen to often says, there's no hate like Christian love. And they can be quite vicious when defending what they think is important parts of their faith.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, I've so far only gotten very nice messages from friends and family who grew up in the same environment I did.
mm.
Um, you know, thanking me for writing the book or just, saying oh my gosh, I didn't know that you were having the same experience as I was, that kind of
Right.
thing. It's really nice and really gratifying.
I remember one time I was at an author talk, and an author said, it was Danny Shapiro, actually, who's a memoirist and novelist. And she said, when you find the courage to say the thing that you think is so shameful, so awful, so painful that everyone would hate you if they ever knew this about you, you will always find 10 people say, oh my God, thank you for saying it. I feel the same
Yeah.
way. And it's
Yeah.
so amazing and so true.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Diana saying she said that she has those craft books as well. Oh, that's so good to know that you have them as well. And she adds that the Bible can also illustrate a cult-like behavior. It is the mindset of the individual that she notices. Absolutely, totally,
I
Diane. Good
agree.
point.
Yeah.
Um, uh, you guys, I want to share that People magazine said that there are midnight. I'm going to pop this up so we can all read it together. There are midnight snack style thrillers, and there are those that stick with you. This is the latter. Tell us what that meant to you, Amy. That must have been really validating.
Oh, that was amazing. Just first of all, People magazine obviously was like something I grew up seeing all the time, like we all
Great.
did, I guess. Like it's not I'm not special. It was always on the shelf, at the grocery store when you're walking down the aisle and all that stuff. And yeah, just having it be in there first in the first place was so exciting. And then, having it recommended in a way that, shows that they really read it and they understood what I was trying to do,
Yes.
with the whole thriller that sticks with you.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with books that are written for pure entertainment value and nothing else. And I
Totally.
love those books and I cling to them.
Yeah.
But it's not the type of book that I write. I'm always writing from a place of rage
Mm,
and writing about things that make me angry and that I want to change.
mm.
And so to have someone read it and instead of going, well, I didn't think the twist was really that exciting or that kind of thing from a like a pure thriller perspective, but to say that it stuck with them was just really, really nice to hear.
Absolutely. And People Magazine naming this a must read book of the summer. Congratulations on that. And they are not the only ones raving. Publishers Weekly calling this an enthralling psychological thriller. Congratulations on that. And the New York Times Book Review saying Suitor Clarke paints a devastating portrait of a cult like institution and a town in its thrall. It is even worse than we have imagined. Powerful praise there from the incredible New York Times Book Review. And they're
Thank
not the
you.
only ones who are raving. Let's pop up Bryn Greenwood, who said Amy Cedar Clarke perfectly captures the stifling air of small towns and insular churches. More than a murder mystery, this is an excavation of betrayal, revealing the ugly truth that has propped up so many life-destroying lies. Congratulations on that rave review. Samantha
Thank you.
Downing is coming on the show next Monday, calls this an
Oh,
emotionally
yay.
charged and unnerving thriller, dangerous secrets, complex characters, and more than one, oh my God, moment you will not see the twists coming. Y'all, I want to remind you that this book is out now and you can order it tonight from our favorite woman owned bookstore. That is, of course, Murder by the Books. No matter where you're watching from tonight, order right now. I'm going to pop up the link so we can all see it together. You can click and order it from wherever you're watching from. And you too can immerse yourself in this enthralling read. Here it is. Also, I want to get some more of this praise because we're actually over our time, but there's so much good meat to get through. And I want to be sure to include Kelly Clark's rave review because Kelly was on the show when her book, Like a Sister, came out. And I want to share what she had to say, which is, and I'm going to pop it up right so we can all read. Amy Suitor Clarke's Lay Your Body Down has everything that I love in a good thriller, family drama, a determined main character, and an unflinching look at a timely issue. The story of Dell Walker returning home to confront her past and members of the corrupt megachurch that was once the center of her life will stay with you long after you have reached its gripping conclusion. Congratulations on that from an incredibly talented Kelly Garrett.
Yes, she's the best.
She really is. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anybody's last minute questions here because they're coming in faster than then my little finger can scroll. But Amy, I wanted to thank you for coming on and giving us this inside scoop and telling us about your personal experience, which informed this. We have two last questions. How long did it take you to write this book?
So the first draft that I had to throw away took only about like 6 months. I wrote that in 2020
Oh
after I
wow.
got my book deal, but before my book came out. And then I had to wait a few months for my editor to go through it. And then we had the conversation about how it wasn't working the way it was. And so then I had to rewrite it, which took, I think, 8 months because I had twins during that time. So,
Uh-huh.
excuse me, I wrote most of it, rewrote most of it while I was pregnant, but my brain was really broken when I was pregnant. So I was amazed that anything that came out was coherent. So the whole process really, I mean, again, factoring in the time that it was with the editor, took about a year and a half, I think, a little over a year and a half. And I'm definitely trying to cut that time down for the next book that I'm working on because I would like to stay with that sort of a book every 2 years schedule for myself. I don't think I can be a book a year author,
I cannot.
and I don't know how people can.
Yeah.
Um, so that's the plan.
Some mysteries are not meant to be solved. Um, Diane was saying, do you use any specific software, writing software, Scrivener, Word, Plotter? I use Scrivener. How about you?
I use Scrivener. Yeah. I'm
Can't
very much
learn that.
a scene-based writer, so
Yeah.
I write, most of my scenes are less than 2,000 words,
Mm,
and I also write epistolary elements in all of my books. So the Girl 11 has podcast transcripts, Lay Your
mm,
Body Down has diary entries and blog posts, and my next book is going to have posts on an internet forum. And
mm.
so Scrivener is really nice for just being able to shuffle things around.
It's so
Um,
true.
yeah, I don't use probably 90% of the functionality of Scrivener. Like there's a lot of things you can do in it.
Yes.
But that aspect is very useful to me.
Yeah. And I even did the I think 2.5 hour YouTube training, and I'm still not using all of the
Yeah,
functionality. Diane's putting out there for food for thought. She says, I prefer the term discovery writer to pantser, is more accurate to who I am. That's such a
I
good point
like
because the
that.
word pantser doesn't really sound appealing. It's like nobody wants to be pantsed. I know I don't.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
it's never been my favorite term. So I
mm,
like discovery writer.
yeah, that's a great term, Diane. Thank you. All right, y'all, the book is out now, and you can order it now from our favorite woman owned independent bookstore. That is, of course, Murder by the Book. Here is that link. Click and order it. There it is on Facebook. Here it is on YouTube. So, no matter where you're watching from, give it a click, give it an order, and then hop over to Mystery and Thriller Ravens, where all the good tea is spilled. And we're talking about our favorite reads. We're talking about characters. We're talking about craft. We're talking all the good things. So free and open to all. Amy, thank you so much for joining us live from Melbourne, Australia.
Thank
Congratulations
you.
on all the incredible praise this book has earned. Oh, one last question for Diane. Do you save the original manuscript?
Oh, yes. Yeah. It's in my folder somewhere. Yeah.
Yay.
And I
Yay.
just want to say too, small plug, but if you have read the book and you like it, please leave a review on wherever website. You don't have to have bought it on Amazon to leave a review on Amazon, but it really does help out, and I would be so grateful. So thank you.
That is a wrap, y'all. I'll be back at the top of the hour with writing team Suzanne Dunn and Matt Dorf, aka L.R. Dorn, in their latest with a kiss we die. Sorry, with a kiss you
Mm.
die at the
Oh,
top of the hour. I will see you then.
great.